As I do that, Mr. Speaker, I want to join you and the leadership of the Senate to welcome back our colleagues from recess and hope that this session, Mr. Speaker, shall be fruitful for the benefit of the people that we represent in this House. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to really thank and congratulate Senator Professor Margaret Kamar and Senator Chris Olasige for coming up with such a wonderful bill, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Bill number 2023. The Speaker, I want to go straight to the provisions of the bill and declare that I fully support this bill. The Speaker, when you look at the objects of this bill, as captured in clause 3, from A to I, the objects of this bill can be summed up as an attempt to help the deaf in society to realize their full potential, both in school and in society. That the promoters of this bill have applied their minds to constitutional provisions on the right to develop the Kenyan Sign Language and reduced that into a bill that then, if it is passed, and I know it will be, then it will give effect to the stated constitutional provisions. The Speaker, the bill in clause 4 speaks to a targeted public participation. Mr. Speaker and honorable colleagues, if there is one thing that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 blessed this nation with, is a provision to ensure that any legislation in any house, in any assembly, be it the National Assembly, the county assemblies, or the Senate, any legislation before it becomes an act of parliament, before it becomes law, it has to pass through public participation, so that the public can have a say on how they are being governed and how the laws that govern them are being made. For the most part, Mr. Speaker, public participation in a lot of instances when we are making laws has more or less become a PR exercise. It has become just an act of ticking the boxes and ensuring that we have lived to the expectations of the Constitution and the law. But in this bill, Mr. Speaker, the promoters are pushing for targeted public participation by the users and consumers of the Kenyan Sign Language, so that they are brought on board, that their views, their needs, and their aspirations are catered for when it comes to legislation. The Speaker, clause 6 recognizes that the Kenyan Sign Language is actually a first language to a section of our society. And that it is also a first language by choice to a section of our society. And in so doing, the Speaker, then it pushes for the use of sign language in legal proceedings, in our courts, in our tribunals. And the Speaker, that's a big step and a step in the right direction. And I want to take this opportunity, the Speaker, even as we push for that to happen in legal proceedings, and congratulate our mainstream media houses. Over a period of 5, 6, maybe 7 years, media houses have invested in sign language for especially their news bulletins. I would encourage them to take a bold step and make sign language part of their everyday, every minute, every hour communication with the public. So that even in broadcasts that are not news bulletins, then we have interpreters there who use a sign language. The Speaker, I like the provisions of Clause 7 of the bill, where the Cabinet Secretary is obligated to ensure that deaf learners are taught in a manner which they are able to understand, that the CS should ensure teachers of deaf children acquire sufficient competence in the use of English and Kiswahili language, and ensure development of supportive instructional materials for the education of deaf learners. So, Speaker, the provisions of that clause have very far-reaching implications on the Cabinet Secretary responsible for education. One, this clause, by the nature of the way it has been drafted, obligates the CS to ensure the training and the recruitment of additional special teachers, especially teachers for deaf children. That clause, the Speaker, ensures that the Kenya Institute of Special Education, and I will cross-reference that to the provisions of Clause 18. You know, the Speaker, for the longest time, the Kenya Institute of Special Education, which is based in Nairobi, has virtually been the only institution in this country that is training special teachers for all the schools in the country. So the competition for enrollment at Kisii all the time has overwhelmed the capacity of the institution to absorb as many teachers as are necessary to ensure that the provisions of Clause 7 of this bill are met. So, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't pay lip service to a bill as important as this, then mechanisms must be put in place, and I'm very sure my teacher, Professor Kamar, will follow through on this one, to ensure then we begin to devolve Kisii, that the Kenya Institute of Special Education cannot just be based in Nairobi. There will be a need to devolve that institution so that in Kakamega, we have a Kenya Institute of Special Education in the same way that we have Kenya medical training colleges all over the country, even at the constituency level. So, Mr. Speaker, we open opportunities for teachers to to be trained for special education all over the country. That way, then, the provisions of Clause 7 will begin to make sense. Mr. Speaker, the other obligation on the Cabinet Secretary is that because there is need then for him or her to ensure that there is development of sufficient supportive instructional materials, then my teacher, Professor Kamar, then we must also find a way of making it an obligation on the Minister for Education, when they are doing capitation for schools, to ensure then that they factor the need to purchase special instructional materials to cater for the needs of children with difficulties in hearing. Mr. Speaker, I fully support this bill, and as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, the provisions of Clause 18, which I had made reference to. In fact, what the promoters of this bill are saying is that as much as is practically possible, then everybody who goes to school, they need to be trained in the Kenyan Sign Language. That is aspirational, but it's a good step. It's a place to begin. So that, in fact, going into the future, then the Kenyan Sign Language, because it is called Kenyan, which means it is uniquely Kenyan, then the Kenyan Sign Language becomes the third national or official language in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, then that way, we don't need special interpreters of messaging on radio, on TV, in public rallies. That if I go to Kakamega to address a rally, I can very easily just tap any person that has gone to a school and tell them, come here and translate for the people, because everybody then will have attained sufficient competencies for Kenyan Sign Language. If this Kenyan Sign Language, then it's our language to speak, and I believe it is, then we must show it by example. We must begin to teach it in schools. It must begin to become an examinable subject in our schools. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I support the bill.
Senator Chirenge.